It's me again, Key Huang Insights. Let's get straight to the point. On February 23rd, more than 59 million German voters cast their ballots in the parliamentary elections, and the results shocked the European Union at its most crucial moment. While the opposition Conservatives won big, the far-right party also achieved a record second place. The party of incumbent Chancellor Olaf Scholz bitterly admitted defeat, ending one of the most unpopular governments in modern German history. The economy is stagnant, inflation is high, and the cost of living is rising, leaving Germans pessimistic about their standard of living. The people's dissatisfaction became fertile ground for the rise of the far right. Today, Germany in particular and Europe in general perhaps regret their stubborn support for Ukraine to oppose Russia to the end for the past 3 years. The wrong choice is making Europe pay a very high price. First, the Ukraine crisis has cost Europe a lot of money. Statistics show that in 3 years, the U.S. has provided nearly $120 billion in aid to Ukraine, more than twice as much as aid from EU institutions. The total amount of aid to Ukraine from EU institutions such as the European Investment Bank is $52.1 billion. However, if we count the total amount of aid to Ukraine, including EU institutions and member states, the figure is $137.6 billion, significantly higher than US aid. But what does Europe get in return? The goal of being able to create a military defeat for Russia on the battlefield is almost impossible. Meanwhile, expensive European aid to Ukraine is wasted. NATO believes that the Ukrainian army is a fool, combining expensive Western toys with Soviet military tactics that rely on cheap firepower. NATO tactics, on the other hand, involve using modern and expensive systems to deliver precision strikes. For example, Ukrainian soldiers are using next-generation light anti-tank weapons, a single-use anti-tank missile that costs about $21,000 and was donated by the UK, as if they were using RPGs. And the RPG is a cheap Russian anti-tank weapon that typically costs as little as $1,000 a shot. Even when Ukrainian soldiers were asked to share videos of how to properly use the grenade, footage showed them launching 5 or 6 of the expensive grenades at a time at Russian positions. It can cost as much as $100,000. Not only that, but there are also internal conflicts in Europe over aid to Ukraine. Recently, the European Anti-Fraud Office demanded that Poland return €91 million to the EU for embezzling charity money. Just kidding. The story is that Poland used EU-funded money to buy generators for Ukraine. However, I don't understand how they colluded with each other, but some contractors charged 40% more than the purchase price, leading to a significant increase in the price of EU-funded generators. Speaking of electricity, it is impossible not to emphasize that. In 3 years of trying to ban Russian gas, Europe has found itself in an increasingly complex energy crisis. Homes are not warm enough, gas tanks are full, factories are closed, and businesses are leaving in droves. In order to escape its dependence on Russian gas, Europe has sought new alternative sources. As a result, Norway is now the largest gas supplier to Europe, mainly through pipelines. But Russia is set to emerge as the second largest supplier of liquefied natural gas, LNG, to Europe by 2024 after the United States. LNG is a relatively expensive option, however. As a result, natural gas prices in Europe have fallen from their record highs in 2022. But in 2024, they will still be double the 5-year average before the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The high gas prices have contributed to inflation and forced factories that employ thousands of people in Europe to close or relocate to countries with cheaper energy. Many of Europe's biggest companies are cutting back. German chemical giant BASF said it would stop some production at its home base. Instead, it will invest heavily in China, where energy prices are 2/3 cheaper than in Europe. In addition, high gas prices have increased the cost of producing ammonia, a key ingredient in fertilizers. Yara International, a fertilizer giant based in Norway, has stopped producing ammonia at its U.S. plant. High energy and fertilizer prices have pushed up prices for all commodities. Households across Europe face a persistent cost crisis. Electricity shortages are soaring across Europe. Nearly 10% of the population say their homes are unheated. More and more households are falling behind on their electricity bills. Houses that are leaking even more. and the loss of Russian gas is not cooling down. Europe's energy crisis is about to get another blow from its top electricity supplier, Norway. Another way for EU countries to move away from Russian energy dependence is to increase the development of wind and solar power. Germany's power grid is more dependent on the weather than ever before. That means that if it doesn't have enough baseload power running 24/7, Berlin will have to import electricity from neighboring countries to fill its reserves during the long, dark, and windless winters. Neighboring Norway's energy market has also been hit hard by Europe's renewable energy boom. As Germany's grid absorbs more and more Norwegian power, electricity prices in Norway have skyrocketed for many domestic consumers. Norway has a cheap and abundant supply of hydropower, so the Norwegian people are unhappy that they have to sacrifice cheap electricity to keep Germany powered. This dissatisfaction has led to serious rifts within Norway, which is not a member of the EU. Under pressure to regain national control over electricity prices, the Norwegian government is considering a control mechanism to limit electricity exports. If Norway were to limit or completely cut off its electricity supply to the EU, it would be a disaster for the bloc. And that's not all. By choosing Ukraine over Russia as a partner, the old continent would deprive itself of the Russian market, investment profits, flights over Russian territory, and cross-border trade. Let's go back to the statistic. Germany and the UK are the two European countries that give the most aid to Ukraine. Okay, these governments, rather than let their people shiver in their homes, not dare to fill up their gas tanks, unemployed, still pump so much into Ukraine. What a shame. Among the world's top 10 economies, Germany has dropped to 5th place, the UK to 10th place. In recent years, some EU member states have even experienced negative or zero growth. Europe's second regret is that, unwillingly, they are forced to accept the fact that their long-standing alliance with the US is entering a period of deep crisis. President Donald Trump's victory has created shocks for Europe time and time again. From Denmark's declaration of wanting to regain control of Greenland, imposing a 25% tariff on imported aluminum and steel, or the Trump administration pushing for negotiations with Russia on the Ukraine issue while ignoring the European voice. However, there are opinions that Europe should blame itself for betting on Kamala Harris's victory and for not making moves to score points in the eyes of the new president. Third, and most seriously, there is a deep rift between the Trump administration and EU leaders over the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. President Trump wants to quickly end a war that he considers unnecessary so that he can focus on more important issues for the United States. Meanwhile, the EU does not seem to want this. President Trump wants and is negotiating with the Putin regime. The EU does not want this. Washington wants to restore relations with Moscow. The EU is not ready for this. President Trump wants to push for a solution to the Ukraine problem. The EU also wants a solution, but only if it is in their best interests, enough for them to accept compared to what they have spent. Obviously, these disagreements and conflicts of interest are causing the rift between the US and the EU to become increasingly larger. Fourth, the EU may have to face great difficulties in the coming time when they do not have the support of the US. Since its inception, Europe has gradually become more dependent on the US political security umbrella. This is reflected in the huge US military presence in Europe, the huge US military budget, and the reliable supply of weapons. Losing the US support will make the European security environment from now on less secure. Fifth, Europe has been dealt a blow that has forced it to wake up. The negotiations between Moscow and Washington have severely weakened Europe's international standing as it has been sidelined on the Ukraine issue. Despite being one of Ukraine's leading aid partners over the past 3 years, Europe has ultimately failed to play a decisive role in the matter. The European media has been bitter in admitting that Europe has been sidelined. It is clear that European leaders want to influence the course of events, but they lack both weight and power. Having lost the support of the United States, Europe is trying to balance on its weaker leg. And with the ambition to become one of the world's leading political centers, Europe has suffered a huge blow. In fact, The European security environment is facing many difficulties and challenges from both traditional and non-traditional security issues. After being left out of the negotiation table between Russia and the US, Europe is afraid that Moscow will mobilize troops again in Ukraine in the future. Or who knows, one of them could be next to be hit by the Kremlin. They are trying to ensure Ukraine's security by ensuring their own. Kiev has been very nervous about sending peacekeeping forces to Ukraine after the fighting ends. President Zelensky has even proposed deploying more than 100,000 European troops to Ukraine. But reality has hit them hard. What European leaders are discussing is not a peacekeeping force along a 1,000-kilometer front line in eastern Ukraine. Instead, the plan backed by Britain and France would see fewer than 30,000 European troops deployed in Ukraine, focused on protecting critical infrastructure such as nuclear power plants rather than directly confronting Russia on the battlefield. But even this plan is unlikely to be implemented without U.S. support. Washington has made it clear that it will not deploy U.S. troops in Ukraine. Let's face it, Europe is now helpless and silently suffering. They have lost their historic role as the center of world diplomacy, a role they shared with the United Nations headquarters in New York. Negotiations with Ukraine will not take place in once neutral Geneva or Helsinki, Paris, or Vienna, but in Saudi Arabia. Many argue that the world's axis has shifted away from Europe, meaning major changes in the structure of the world order in the coming years. Because of all this, I wonder if Europe has woken up yet. What do you think about these outstanding issues? Please discuss with me Cayenne Insights in the comment section. Now goodbye and see you again.